Welcome to this evening's webinar on L2LPs and inclusive practices. So I'm not quite sure if you could hear that recording there, but it was basically just describing the ways that we're going to try and engage with each other in this evening's webinar. So we do have two Padlets available, one that you can write on, that's the notebook, and then we have a toolkit that we have provided for further reading and for further information. We're going to use a poll during the webinar, and that will be launched within the webinar, so you'll just see that come up on your screens. And we're going to try and use Menti to create a word cloud, and you will be using, we'll give you the code to that later on. We are, because we always do try and push ourselves and challenge ourselves, we are going to try and hand over the mic to some of our participants if you're interested and if you'd like to use your voice. And we're going to try and do that using the raised hand icon, which we'll show you in a few moments. There'll also be an opportunity for you to write your responses, again in the Padlet or in the questions section using the controls, which again we'll show you in a second. There is a PDF version of this PowerPoint available in the Padlet toolkit, so you'll be able to download this after this evening and write notes and whatnot. So for those of you that recognise my voice, I'm Sarah Nally and I'm the team leader for the Level 1 and Level 2 Learning Programmes team. I'm joined this evening by my colleagues Fiona Carney and Lisa Kelly and Aoife Smith, who is our. So just to give you an idea, if you've never done a webinar before, how you can access the different parts of this so that you can be fully engaged and that you can fully access the different, I suppose, interactive aspects. You can use the question function by clicking on the question mark icon. Any questions that you write are only visible to us. We may respond to you individually, we may respond to you as a group, but that's what we're going to try and use today for written responses. You can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon that you'll see, and that you'll be indicating to us then that you wish to participate verbally, and we will then hand over the mic to you. Now there's a lot of people logged on this evening, so we're going to see how it goes, but we'll give it a try, we'll give it a go. It might look slightly different on your screen. So this one is a screen grab from an iPad, and then on your computer it might look slightly different, but you still have the hands raised and you still have the handouts icon there. You can see that the mic is green here. If your mic is green, it means you can be heard by everybody. So just to bear that in mind. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Fiona, who's going to take us through the first section of the webinar.
Hello everyone. As Sarah said, this is Fiona speaking. So these are going to be our learning intentions for this evening's learning experience that we're going to explore tonight. And if you just want to have a quick look, the objectives here will be to look at inclusive practices and what they look like, to understand inclusive pedagogy through a lens of universal design for learning, to apply that UDL approach to future learning experience incorporating L2LPs, and finally to develop a plan of action to deliver that clear, consistent message of inclusion across all CPD, including further supports that are available. So in line with those learning intentions, we also have our success criteria, which in this case, hopefully at the end of this learning experience, that you'll be able to list some inclusive practices. We will be sharing collaboratively thoughts on inclusive pedagogy throughout, and you will aim to set yourself the target of developing an action plan of charting your next steps for future inclusive practice, be it professional learning experiences or shared examples with your colleagues. So what are inclusive practices? Well, inclusive practices are not more work, but rather different work. And let's look at ways that we can support yourselves and colleagues in that different work. We normally, when we have a child in front of us, we'll look at what barriers that we need to think about that the child might face in their learning. Actioning then supports to overcome those barriers. But before that, we need to know our children and know the students in front of us. And then we'll really start to think about the design and how to plan a unit of work to support those students. And then working collaboratively with our colleagues in order to be able to enhance that teaching, learning and assessment of our students. So now we move on to frame. Firstly, we're going to plan to show you a video. And that this video is about working with, because we work with diverse students in front of us, that we plan to look at how we can support and enable them. So hopefully you're going to, when you view the video, that there's certain considerations that you might keep in mind. That you'll first of all reflect which animal that you might associate with, what talent you have yourself, and what is the lesson that you'll take away from this video. So we're just going to put it on now and hope that you enjoy it. I suppose on reflection, when you look at that video as well, it was about an animal school had created a curriculum that they felt that was suitable for the animals to overcome the challenges of the new world, and that was where it was running, climbing, swimming and flying, and hopefully it gave you food for thought. So we're going to move on from there. We're going to think about a student's learning experience and how we can support and enable them to experience the success. So if you can see here that in the first there we have a speech bubble on your screen, and you can see the difficulties that the student is expressing to the teacher. Now let's consider that student's experience. Now we're going to ask you, would be an activity, and we welcome your participation, where we want you to either use the questions tool or the Padlet to send your responses. So firstly, what might you consider the students' strengths to be? What might be the barriers to their learning be? And then finally, what supports can we as teachers offer the students to enable his or her learning? So I'd invite you to make your responses now in the question tools section, or as I say, in Padlet as well. And we'll just give you a few moments to be able to, and we welcome your responses. Okay, well, there's been great responses coming in there and really good suggestions from everybody in terms of recognising barriers, and also the means being able to fortify their strengths and overcome their barriers. So we will collate all of these and we'll share them with you. So think about the supports or enablers that you can put in place to help students overcome obstacles within your subjects. So in fact, that dovetails nicely into where we're going to go next, which is why are we talking about this and design, where we are about to explore universal design for learning. And as mentioned, its origins may have, well, actually, its origins do lie within architecture, and that it's been further explored in the area of neuroscience. So the two key words that came from our video there that we had a look at were variability, and also, and I'm wondering, can anybody make out what this next word is that's graphically represented? And it's diversity. So in that, we as practitioners do identify and appreciate that we have a diversity of learners in front of us, and that we are going to be planning for that variability. So how will we be able to consider that variability in terms of our classroom practice? And certainly through universal design for learning will be one means of doing that. Now here we have the universal design for learning principles, 3 key principles that were developed by the CAST organisation. These are multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action. But when we talk about multiple means of engagement, I suppose the key areas that we're thinking about would be that building of bridges in terms of relationships, making the language as understandable as possible, the expectations that we have for our students to succeed, and that, very importantly, that it's fun and that it's an enjoyable experience for all. The multiple means of representation, certainly the key things that we can draw from that will be that flexible teaching methods, the importance of choice, the combination of vocabulary and symbols to aid comprehension, the use and embeddedness of technology and digital aids, the employment of visuals, notes being made available to the students prior to as a pre-teaching exercise, mind maps, and then that multiple means of action and expression. Certainly the importance of clear goals and the range of assessments, the constructive feedback, the need for choice, those self-assessment moments built in, and importantly, that those opportunities for reflection for the students. So given that scaffolding, the bedrocks being the principles, let's look at it in an applicable format then. So this, and hopefully we're going to be able to involve you in this activity. This is asking you, how would you teach a person to tie their shoelaces? And how would we plan a means of being able to teach the child or person? So we're inviting you to respond on the Padlet or in the question tool section. So I'd invite you to do that now, and I'll just give you a moment to do that.
So, folks, as you can see, we're delighted that some of you managed to get over to the Padlet, because this is going to be a useful resource for you going forwards. You can, as you can see there, lots of similarities with quite a familiar task, I would say. So we've got demonstration, actually doing it, using that frame with the real laces, using a real shoe, visual aids, role playing. I know I taught, and I'm still teaching one of my sons using the songs. So Mel there, hand over hand as well. You may as well actually go to Velcro, as someone has quite rightly said there. So absolutely a varied type of experience is how we all probably learn best. So I'm going to hand back over. Thank you for doing that. We're loving how interactive this is. It's keeping us very busy. So if we're not getting to your questions straight away, please be assured that we will be reviewing them at the end of the webinar, and we will aim to get back to you by the end of next week anyway. So I'm going to hand back over to Fiona. I'm going to just get her back into the presentation, and we'll continue on then.
Okay. So on your screen at the moment, there's a link that refers to a quiz that has been devised by and sourced from AHEAD, the organisation ahead.ie. And it's really for further information on universal design for learning, that in your own time, that you could complete this quiz. And the link of the quiz is in the resources handout for the webinar section as well. So by completing this quiz, it gives you an opportunity to explore and explains UDL via examples, and really what will help you reflect on really how much you're actually doing within your own classroom practice that has the pedagogical approach of universal design for learning. So why enact universal design for learning? Why practice it at all? Why look at it as a means of inclusive practice in our classroom? Well, it is a very well-researched pedagogical approach. It underpins the junior cycle framework. Most importantly, it has the student at the centre. And it's about celebrating that diversity in the classrooms and enabling all students to achieve that potential we want all students to achieve. Now, furthermore, just to let you know, there are more links in relation to the UDL resources on the Padlet. So now I'm going to be handing now over to my colleague Lisa, who will walk you through a universally designed learning experience that is clearly creating links between the learning outcomes of the Level 2 learning programmes and the Level 3 short course of the SPG. So thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Fiona, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to walk the walk in a universally designed classroom. So we'll begin with the planning document, And on your screen now, you will see a sample unit of work that has been created for the purposes of tonight's webinar, incorporating the Wellbeing Short course of SPHE at Level 3, and indeed the Level 2 learning programmes, and 4 of the 5 priority learning units are covered in this scheme of work. This scheme of work is designed to last between 4 and 5 weeks, and so what you'll see tonight is one lesson that forms the part of this unit of work. So the learning outcomes that we will look at tonight from Level 3, the one we will look at is reflect on the personal, social and legal consequences of their own or others' drug use. And the Level 2 learning outcome we will look at is to give 2 examples of lifestyle choices which affect our health. So we'll begin with learning intentions. So they will be that you will know the effects smoking has on physical health. You will personally reflect on some reasons why people begin smoking, and you will demonstrate a personal and social effect of smoking and why young people should resist. As you will know from your previous junior cycle CPD, success criteria should be co-created, allowing student voice within the classroom. But for the purposes of time tonight, we have created success criteria for these learning intentions. And so the success criteria will be to list 3 effects of smoking on physical health, to express at least one thought on why you think people should start smoking, and the third one will be to present in a format of your choice at least one personal and one social effect along with one reason why young people should not smoke. So the first task that we'll ask you to take part in tonight is to use a word blast. Now in the classroom we would run this on a whiteboard or on a flip chart, but for the purposes tonight we will use Menti. So I would ask you to go to the resources handout attached to this webinar and to click into the Menti, and you will require the code 384416 to join. So I'll just give you a minute to do it here and we'll get it up on the screen at the same time. So you're visiting Menti and the code is 384416. And what we're asking you to do here is to start putting in, and some of you are at it already, which is great, words you know about smoking. So words you associate with smoking and words you know about smoking. The reason we do this with students is to check in on prior knowledge and to introduce vocabulary to other students that might not be aware. So the words are starting to fly in here, and this strategy is called a word cloud. And the bigger the word, it means the more people have put it in. So this is actually a very useful classroom tool to use, should you have access to technology, of course. So we've words like inhalation, addictive, cancer, smell, lungs, and really what we're doing here is, like I said, checking in on prior knowledge and also to introduce new vocabulary then to other students within the class. So if we go back to class, you'll see on the slide, so here's an example of a word cloud, but you'll see the example of what it looks like in the classroom, okay? The next task within the class is a video about the effects of smoking. Now, a direct link to this video is in both the Padlet and in the resources section. We're not going to show it to you today, and I think given our technical difficulties with videos, that's probably a good choice. But it's about the effects of smoking, and it's introduced in class with the instruction for students to listen carefully to the vocabulary and facts given. And students are invited to use whatever means they choose to remember this vocabulary and words and facts, okay? So we invite students to write it down, as you can see some students doing in the picture, to draw the key facts, to close their eyes, and some, in fact, will even move around, of course, while not disturbing others, to try and remember the facts, because the next activity will be linked to these effects of smoking. So the third task is a matching activity based on the effects of smoking, again available in the PDF resources attached to this webinar. And this activity is specifically designed to provide access and challenge for all students. So you'll see on the table the demonstration of the matching exercise that there are 3 parts to the matching activity. There's a visual, there's a word, and there's a sentence or phrase. There's also on the screen a green card, which would be left on the desk as well. And this is to provide challenge to students who feel that the matching activity didn't provide that challenge to them. Ample time and support is given to students to complete this matching activity. And once it's finished, the teacher then asks each group to hold up the matching visual, sentence and picture, or visual, sentence and word. This allows to check in that students have in fact matched them correctly, and it's also to give those auditory learners in the class a chance to hear the phrase and word read aloud by their classmates. So we'll move on then to the next task. So at this point in the class, we have to be very aware that the students have been sitting still. So in a class, this will run as a walking debate, but tonight we'll run it as a poll through the GoWebinar app. So if you see the word poll will appear, and you simply click. So you simply click on the reason as to why you feel, personally, you feel people begin to smoke. So some of you are at it already, which is great, and it's coming up. But in the classroom, there's 4 posters in the 4 corners with the 4 reasons, which we've researched the previous lesson. And there's a 5th poster in the middle of the room, which states any other reason. So once you have clicked, or in the class case, students have gone and stood under the relevant poster, we ask then, the teacher will ask students to share the reason for their choice with the person beside them, and ask those who feel comfortable then to share with the class. So students are listening and learning from their peers at this stage, and also they can do it in small groups, like I said, one-to-one, or to share with the class. So we're coming towards the end of the lesson. I have to say you're the best behaved class I've probably ever taught. But if we look at the last part of the lesson, it's homework, the dreaded word, of course, but the necessary evil. So I'd ask you to take out the students to take out their diaries or their assistive technology devices. I will explain to students that the homework is available on Google Classroom, and I've also emailed it to those who've given me prior knowledge. And as always in my classroom, there's a choice for homework. So the first is to imagine you've been asked to create a second TV advert, a 30-second TV advert, and you must create a storyboard that illustrates the personal and social effects of smoking. The second choice is to create a leaflet using ICT about the personal and social effects of smoking and why you should resist. And the third one may look familiar because it was introduced at the matching activity to provide challenge to those students within the class, and it's to design an anti-drug campaign. We'll revisit then at the end of the lesson the learning intentions, and so you will know the first one being you will know the effect smoking has on physical health, and the success criteria here was to list the 3 effects of smoking on physical health, and we checked in on this during the matching activity when we brought it back to the class. The second learning outcome is you will personally reflect on some reasons why people begin smoking. And we checked in on this, if you remember, during the poll tonight or during the walking debate. And the third learning intention would be that you will demonstrate a personal and social effect of smoking and why young people should resist. And this is linked to homework, to the homework piece that they will present in class the following week. So I will hand you over now to Sarah and Ali, who's going to take you through how we might assess this particular learning in an inclusive fashion.
What Lisa had set at home as homework was that students would present their learning. So they would present at least one personal and one social effect of smoking, and they would explain or present why young people should not smoke. So I suppose that final criteria may be realised and actioned and met through a homework piece. So as a teacher, I could insist that everyone actually is going to present their learning and the required criteria by way of a poster. But who would I be excluding? And I can see from your questions well, actually they're not questions, they're comments, they're observations that people, that you're sharing there. It's one of the barriers nearly in classrooms to learning, to teaching, to learning, to assessment is this idea of one size fits all. So I suppose I could say to everyone, right, we're going to do a poster, but who would I be excluding? So I could be excluding those students that prefer to verbalise their learning and their knowledge. I could be excluding students because of fine motor skills that maybe they can't, their drawing skills mightn't be, they mightn't like drawing, they mightn't have very good fine motor skills. So I'm going to change my mind actually, and I'm going to say, okay, everyone's going to do a presentation. But again, who am I excluding in that way, in that mode? You know yourself, it's going to be those students that don't like standing up, that don't like presenting in front of their peers, maybe students that would have speech difficulties. So I really have to think about how I'm going to assess. And I suppose the key piece of info in that piece of criteria there for teachers and for students is that piece in the brackets. It's in a format of your choice. So if I can allow students to demonstrate in multiple means, instantly I've removed potential barriers to students demonstrating their learning. Just like you've had the opportunity throughout this webinar to interact through the Padlet or through the questions, this is what we need to be doing in our classrooms as well. So I've also engaged students. If I'm offering them choice and flexibility in how they are going to demonstrate their learning, so that there's a hook there straight away. They are showing what they know in a way that they enjoy. So I suppose for me, one of the key pieces is that multiple means of action and expression. And we have it there in the graphic that students, can they say their homework? Can they write it? Can they do it? Can they draw it? So on and so forth. So it should be accessible and it should be barrier free. It should also be challenging. And I think through the lesson through the learning experience that Lisa shared with you, you were introduced to that green card, to that having a challenge on the table, and that challenge is there for everybody. So I think this piece that students are expected to engage with, it means that we're challenging them, that this can go as far as they want to take it. So it could be students are actually standing up giving a speech. It could be that students are running that anti-drug campaign, or maybe they're writing a persuasive, or maybe they're role-playing the victim of cancer, So assessment should be challenging as well. As teachers, we're more likely to see the strengths of students when they're demonstrating knowledge and skills in the best way that suits them. And it's going to spark pointers for us to consider how and where we can push our students and provide feedback, which I'm going to move on to now. I suppose two words spring to mind in relation to inclusive assessment, and that is they are, should I say, access and challenge. And I suppose what I would see happening in the classroom is that it would become very active, very busy, very engaged, with very happy students. Of course, it's not easy, and it's that is something that we're on a journey towards. So what about inclusive feedback? So as we think about assessment, we should also be thinking about feedback. We've provided a link on the resources handout to a video that has been created by teachers and students in relation to feedback. And basically that video teases out this acrostic poem a little bit more. What do we want to say about it this evening? Well, we want to say that feedback, it should be positive, yet it should drive learning and thinking on. But we have to think about the type of feedback we're giving, why we're giving it, and how we are giving it. Everybody should get feedback. It's not just those students that do exceptionally well in our classrooms. Equally, it's not those students that needs that constant reinforcement, that constant check-in, that constant. We have to think about how we're providing feedback is putting barriers in place to students' learning. Our kids switching off because all we ever say is not good enough, and I'm not suggesting anybody does that, but we have to think about the culture of the classroom in relation to feedback. It should be unique, so it really should focus in on where the student is at and where they need to go to. It should be done, and do it right is quite an easy thing again to throw out there, but it should really reinforce where a student is at, scaffold their learning, and drive on their learning. In that doing it right piece as well, there's also something to me that ties back to success criteria. So when we were going through this, I was kind of saying, look, we were looking at pieces of work and we were saying, okay, what was the criteria for success here? What can I give feedback on? Can I start commenting on a student's spelling mistakes if that was never laid out as a goal for that student in the first place? So it has to be done right. It really has to tie back to success criteria as well. Bring it on means don't be afraid to give feedback. I mean, absolutely everybody needs feedback. We all learn. We're all constantly learning, and we're learning from doing things, from seeing things, from making mistakes, but we certainly learn from feedback, as do our students. So again, just think about how you're doing it, what you're saying. So adapt it is in relation to the particular cohort group of students that you have in front of you. Some students don't like being made an example of. Some students prefer a thumbs up, or perhaps a pat on the back, or a homework pass, or so adapt it really is about knowing your students, knowing who is in front of you. I know in my classroom experience there was a couple of students who just that thumbs up or just a well done was what they needed. It's what they looked for. If I held up a piece of work and said this is exceptional or brilliant or whatever words I would use, it would embarrass them. It would actually turn them in onto themselves. So adapt it is all to do with the students that you have in front of you. Connect me. So again, that's about bringing it back to my learning, making it relevant to me, telling me what I need to do next. And keep me going is exactly that. What do I need to know to move on? So that's, I said in a nutshell, but it kind of took me a long time to get through that slide. So please do have a look at the video on the website that just teases out that, but you really hear the student and the teacher voice in relation to that, because that's where it's come from. It's come from the classroom. So folks, we're coming to the end of the webinar. I hope you found it useful. I know we have, again, as I said, we're all learning and we still haven't nailed the technology, but one day we will. So thank you for your patience in relation to that. We're going to just finish off by doing a recap and just suggesting maybe a couple of action plans for moving forward. So I suppose the key learning in animal school in the video, there wasn't actually any, there is a lovely piece of music to that, but the subtitles on that video work particularly well. Equally, if you'd have had somebody narrating that, then that would have been a little bit more UDL'd, because access would have been there through the words, through the sound, and there's that lovely music to make you fall asleep as well. Animal School was all about diversity in classrooms, and it really highlighted the curriculum and the possible constraints within curriculum. So it highlighted to us certainly a need for context and student-centered planning, as not all animals thrived in that school, and I'm sure as teachers that's what we want to see. We want to see all of our students thriving. So the video of the normals then provided an insight into a diverse family and some of the barriers that they met. Mihal then brought us into maybe the barriers that we might face in schools, in our culture. The rest of the normals video you can have a look at really explores how universal design can be used as a means of overcoming barriers or eradicating them. And when we apply that to education, we're looking at what are the barriers students face in our classrooms and what can we do to enable learning. So the UDL framework then we've made reference to, and it really is something that we encourage you to go off and have a look at by using the links on the Padlet. But it could give us a deeper understanding of how to enable learning in our classrooms and start to think about how we engage with students and how they demonstrate and express their learning. We experienced the UDL then in the learning experience which Lisa took us through, and we saw multiple ways of information, of how information was presented, including how accessible it was and presenting that challenge then. Finally, we considered inclusive assessment and feedback, ensuring that it's accessible and it's barrier-free. So to conclude, These may be some actions that you wish to consider as you move on after this evening's webinar. Of course, you can get in touch with any of the team through our JCT accounts. These may be areas that you want to have a look at, that you could apply your learning from this evening's webinar to a class or learning experience and let us know how it goes. We're always looking for stories to share from the classroom, and we tuned into the L2LPs and the L2LPs in English, and we particularly liked the teacher voice there and the examples of the lived experience. So you could go about analysing then what has worked in a classroom, what has worked in a learning experience, what has not worked, and the reasons why. And then you could evaluate, consider the actions needed to make the learning experience more effective, therefore improving outcomes for all. These three are actually the top end of Bloom's taxonomy. You're probably familiar with them, but these three areas are areas that we would be encouraging students that would be exceptionally able to move into. So they're past remembering, and that we need to move them on into these areas. So this is a suggested action plan for you, and as I said, do come back to us. There's lots of resources for you to use going forward. So JCT has a wealth of information on there, and do keep checking back into it because more and more teams are adding information about the Level 2 learning programs and what they look like in the classroom. Twitter, our Twitter handle is very active in relation to information on Level 1s and Level 2s, but also inclusion in general. We have given you access to an inclusion toolkit, which we will keep adding to. So it's, you could have access that to on your desktop. It's ideas for further and future reading and research, different websites that we found particularly useful. And our sister support service then under the NCSE, the SESS, all the acronyms as usual, they have a fantastic website, and there's a section on that called signposts, and that can be used for any teachers who want to find out more information about special education needs in particular. We also have a section on SkullNet for L2LP teacher designed resources, which we are constantly encouraging teachers to upload materials to. There are also some skill developed short courses up there that you may find particularly useful. This webinar has been recorded, and we will omit the giggles in the middle. We will omit the technology glitches. We just want to finish by saying thank you very much. We hope you found it engaging. We will be forwarding on all comments from the questions and Padlet to you after this evening. So thank you very much.